Joko Siswoyo lives with his parents in Simu village, Boyolali, Central Java. In 2022, Joko graduated from a university in Solo with a degree in sports coaching education. He enjoys sports, especially the martial art of karate. After graduating, Joko was accepted as a teacher at a madrasa ibtidaya, which is equivalent to an elementary school, in Boyolali. At the school, Joko not only served as a physical education teacher, but was also entrusted as a class advisor. Additionally, outside of school hours, Joko taught karate lessons to his students. Due to his increasingly busy schedule, Joko decided to rent a room near the school where he taught. Furthermore, Joko had a friend named Agung Nugroho, an old friend who lived in the Jebres area of Solo. At that time, Agung was unemployed. Because of this, Agung and Joko started a small business selling fruit, which was planned to be managed by Agung, while Joko would only help with funding and assist as needed. However, their business did not go as expected and suffered losses. Agung was forced to go into debt to cover those losses. Feeling increasingly pressured by his debts, Agung approached Joko in December 2022 to discuss the problems he was facing. Joko, just learning about this issue, felt shocked and confused because he also did not have enough money to help pay off Agung's debts. Joko suggested that Agung use an online loan and pay in installments each month to avoid paying a large amount at once. However, since Agung's ID card data could no longer be used, Joko offered to use his own ID card data. They eventually applied for a loan of 6 million rupiah from one of the online lending platforms, with installments of 500,000 rupiah per month. After approval, the amount received was only 5 million rupiah, as 1 million rupiah was deducted for administrative fees. Agung promised to pay off the installments each month. However, in the second month and onward, Agung began to struggle to make payments, and by April 2023, he was unable to pay for 3 months. As a result, Joko was frequently contacted and visited by debt collectors because the ID card data used was his. Joko repeatedly contacted Agung to request that he pay the installments, but Agung always made excuses, claiming that his sales were slow and he had no money. Over time, the debt, which had initially been 6 million rupiah, swelled to 13 million rupiah due to penalties and interest. Joko became increasingly stressed from being frequently contacted by debt collectors. When Joko continued to press Agung, Agung eventually became annoyed and blocked Joko's number on WhatsApp, relinquishing his responsibilities. Feeling confused and pressured, Joko tried to find Agung in person but could not get any news about him. Finally, in frustration, Joko posted a status on WhatsApp using a photo of Agung, along with a caption stating that Agung had problems. This status eventually became a topic of conversation among their friends. One of Agung's friends saw the WhatsApp status and showed it to Agung. This is where Agung began to feel offended, believing that Joko had embarrassed him through that WhatsApp status. The situation escalated after the WhatsApp status, and Agung continued to remain unresponsive. Finally, on May 2nd, 2023, after Joko returned from teaching around 8:30 p.m., he decided to search for Agung again by visiting his house in the Jebres area of Solo. Joko went alone on his motorcycle, taking about 25 minutes to arrive. When he arrived at Agung's house, Agung looked surprised by Joko's visit. Without further ado, Joko immediately demanded that Agung pay off the installments, along with the interest and penalties that had accumulated to a total of 13 million rupiah. Joko did not want to hear any excuses, and insisted that Agung settle his debt that very night. Agung, feeling confused, finally promised to pay off all his debts that night. He asked Joko to return to his house at 11 p.m., claiming that the money would only be available at that time. Trusting Agung, Joko returned to his rented room while Agung began to prepare something, not money, but a plan to harm Joko. Agung contacted his friend Gilang, told him about his problems, and invited him to help hurt Joko. Gilang agreed without a second thought. They then began to plan how and where to do it safely. Ultimately, they decided to carry out their plan in a quiet rice field area in Surukala village, Karanganyar, Central Java. Additionally, Gilang invited his relative, who went by the initial G, to bring a sack and a stick. That night, before 11 p.m., Agung prepared to wait for Joko's arrival at his house. Meanwhile, Joko, unaware of Agung's plan, returned to Agung's house promptly at 11 p.m. Upon arriving, Agung said he would borrow money from Gilang and invited Joko to meet Gilang at his workplace, a plastic factory in the Jebres area. Agung asked Joko to explain the situation directly to Gilang so that Gilang would believe him. Trusting Agung, Joko agreed to go. Although he started to feel uneasy, he proceeded with Agung to the plastic factory on his motorcycle. Upon arrival, they met Gilang and Ji, who had secretly prepared the sack and stick. Joko then explained Agung's debt problem to Gilang, who stated he was willing to help pay off the 13 million rupiah debt. However, Gilang mentioned that he did not have that much money on him and suggested they go to his house to get the money. Joko, who had started to feel suspicious, decided to continue because he felt he was already involved. On the way to Gilang's house, Joko secretly shared his location with one of his friends from his boarding house. They rode together on 2 motorcycles, with Agung riding pillion on Joko's bike. In the front, Gilang and his relative, Ji, rode together. As they entered the quiet rice field area in Surukala village, Gilang suddenly stopped, prompting Joko to stop as well. Without much conversation, Agung immediately restrained Joko from behind, while Gilang instructed Ji to take out the stick and sack. They then beat Joko several times until he was weak and helpless. After that, they stuffed Joko into the sack while he was still alive, and added some bricks for weight. The sack was then tied with wire that they had prepared. Once everything was done, they transported the sack on their motorcycles to Mojolaban, Sukoharjo, and dumped it into the Bengawan Solo River. After everything was settled, which was already past midnight, they dispersed, and Agung returned home. Then, on Thursday, May 4th, 2023, residents in Kebak Karamat were shocked by the discovery of a man's body floating by the edge of the Bengawan Solo River. Local residents immediately reported the finding to the police. Soon after, the man's body was evacuated in a bloated condition and taken to the hospital for an autopsy. From the autopsy results, the police believed that the man was a victim of a crime, as there were many bruises on his body. However, the cause of death was not due to the injuries, but rather drowning. This indicated that the victim had been dumped into the river while still alive, leading to his death by drowning. At that time, the victim's identity was unknown, prompting the police to continue investigating the case. After some time, the victim's identity was finally revealed. The victim was Joko Siswoyo, a teacher at an elementary school in Boyolali. When the school authorities learned of the news, they were shocked and saddened, because Joko had not communicated anything about why he had not been attending school. In fact, Joko's presence was eagerly awaited by the students who were preparing for karate practice. Joko's family was also very shocked and devastated after being informed by the police about the discovery of Joko's body. However, because his mother was suffering from a stroke, the family tried to keep this news a secret from her. Meanwhile, his father and 2 older siblings could only resign themselves to the situation, hoping that the perpetrators would be found and brought to justice. The police then conducted further investigations, particularly focusing on Joko's close acquaintances. Based on the investigation, the police obtained information that Joko had a debt problem with a friend named Agung Nugroho, who was a resident of Jagalan village, Jebres district, Solo City. Additionally, one of Joko's boarding house friends claimed to have received a location message from Joko via WhatsApp on the night of the incident, but he only opened the message the next morning. The message indicated that Joko was in the Jebres area, which is Agung's address. From this information and various other clues, the police's suspicions increasingly pointed towards Agung. When the police attempted to check on Agung, he was already missing from home, and no one knew his whereabouts. It was discovered that Agung had fled after learning from the media about the discovery of Joko's body in the Bengawan Solo River, and realizing that the police had begun investigating the case. Agung escaped to Ponorogo, but it did not take long for the police to track him down. On May 5, 2023, 3 days after the tragic incident, Agung was captured during his escape. After his arrest, Agung was interrogated by the police. During the interrogation, Agung eventually confessed to his actions, including the involvement of his friend Gilang and Gilang's relative, who went by the initial G, all of whom were residents of Jebris, Solo City. The next day, on May 6th, Gilang was also successfully apprehended at his home. Meanwhile, G, who had already fled, was still being pursued by the police. In further examinations, Agung admitted that their initial intention was not to take Joko's life, but rather to teach him a lesson, because Agung felt hurt after Joko embarrassed him through the WhatsApp status regarding the debt issue. However, this confession was met with skepticism because they had previously prepared a sack, weights, and wire, indicating that their actions were well planned. After a lengthy court process, Agung was sentenced to life imprisonment for being proven guilty of premeditated murder. Gilang was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while G remains at large and is a wanted fugitive. What are your thoughts on this case? What lessons can be learned? Write your answers in the comments. Subscribe and see you in the next case tomorrow at 9 a.m.